Before we dive into this amazing Wild West tale, I want to hear from you first. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Dallas, Denver, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, or maybe even from across the ocean in London or Sydney? I love seeing how far these stories travel, and every comment makes this journey feel even more connected.
Snow fell in long, whispering sheets, cloaking the quiet train station in a stillness that felt older than time itself. The wooden beams groaned under the weight of frost, and the iron rails lay buried beneath drifts, as though the world had forgotten that travelers once passed through. Beneath the narrow roof, on a bench polished smooth by years of waiting, a woman lay stretched, her breath shallow, her form curled around the swell of her belly. The pale fabric of her dress peeked from beneath an undone coat, a hand resting protectively against the child she carried, another hanging loose, fingers grazing the cold air. Her name was Evelyn May Carter, though no one in town cared to speak it kindly anymore. Her lips parted in restless sleep, but it was not peace, more the surrender of exhaustion. She had carried herself as far as she could, across miles of unforgiving land, only to find judgment waiting where shelter should have been. The townsfolk of Pine Hollow had glanced at her once, then looked away. Whispers had already written her story. Widowed too young, carrying a life alone, a woman best left to fend for herself. Shame was a cold sharper than winter, and it clung to her as tightly as the snowflakes that kissed her hair. Out beyond the station, a shape moved between the pines, dark against the pale drifts. Jonah Blackthorne stepped from the forest, as though carved from its silence, a man not of the town, but of the wilderness. His shoulders were broad, skin weathered, scars hidden in shadows of muscle and sinew. Long black hair fell about his face, and though the air stung with frost, he bore no shirt, only black trousers cinched by a wide belt, a sword at his hip glinting faintly when the light caught. His breath rose in quiet clouds as he paused, the sight of the woman halting him in his tracks. Jonah had learned long ago to pass by what was not his business. He had been raised on the edge of civility, half wild, half ghost, a man spoken of in the town with suspicion. They called him dangerous, untamed, cursed by solitude. He had stopped listening, had let their words become smoke carried off by the wind. But now his eyes lingered on the frail curve of Evelyn's form, the way her hand clung to her belly, as though the child within was all she had left worth protecting. Something in him tightened, a memory stirring, a glimpse of another life, another face lost because he had not been near when needed most. He drew closer, boots crunching softly against the packed snow, yet she did not stir. Her skin was pale, her breath uneven. A lesser man might have touched her shoulder, woken her, claimed her as his to save or discard. Jonah only lowered himself to one knee beside the bench, studying her with the stillness of a sentinel. His hands, rough and calloused, remained at his sides. He made no move to cover her, no attempt to take her burden as his own. He simply stayed, gaze sweeping the shadows of the tree line, every sense sharpened to threat. Wolves roamed in winters like these, both four-legged and two. The night drew on, and he did not leave. His breath smoked in the air, his muscles tensed against the chill. Hours stretched, the silence pressing heavy, broken only by Evelyn's shifting sighs. Above them, the stars burned clear and pitiless, as though watching to see which of them would falter first. By dawn, the town had noticed. Pine Hollow was not large, and nothing that happened at its station remained secret long. Farmers and ranchers heading into the square caught sight of the mountain man by the bench, the woman still slumbering against the wood. Murmurs spread quickly, carried on the wind sharper than frost. "He's taken her in," they said. "The wild one and the widow." Judgment dripped from their tongues like venom, for gossip had always been easier than kindness. Evelyn stirred at last, lids fluttering open, confusion clouding her gaze before clarity struck. A giant of a man stood over her, bare chest stark against the pale snow, eyes dark with an intensity she could not read. For a heartbeat, fear flickered. What could such a man want with her, lying defenseless in the open? But she saw the truth in the stillness of his stance, the way he had neither touched nor moved her. He had simply kept watch. Her lips trembled as she gathered herself upright, clutching her coat to her chest. The memory of whispers echoed in her ears, the town's disdain like a bruise beneath her skin. And now this, the presence of the one they feared most beside her, binding her fate tighter to their scorn. Jonah did not speak. From a pouch at his belt, he drew out dried meat and berries, setting them on the bench without ceremony. She hesitated, pride bristling even through hunger, until her empty stomach betrayed her with a faint groan. Slowly, she took what was offered, each bite tasting more of humility than sustenance. Their eyes met once, fleeting, as though each had touched the other's solitude without meaning to. The town watched from afar, whispering sharper still, but neither of them rose to meet it. Evelyn kept her eyes lowered, Jonah his fixed upon the mountains. The snow thickened, falling heavy and hushed, cloaking them from the world. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft and raw. "Why did you stay?" Jonah's eyes did not leave the ridges beyond the pines. He gave no answer, only a long breath that smoked in the cold, as if his silence was the truest reply. The question lingered between them like a fragile flame, unquenched yet unanswered, while the storm pressed in closer, promising that the days ahead would demand more than either of them yet knew. The storm did not wait for mercy. By the next day, the snow came harder, a relentless white curtain that swallowed the mountains and pressed against the town's fragile roofs. Beneath that heavy sky, Evelyn doubled over, clutching her belly, as a sharp cry escaped her lips. The life within her had chosen its hour, and it was too soon, too raw. Her knees buckled against the frozen ground outside the station, breath steaming, eyes wild with pain. Jonah caught her before she fell, arms strong around her slight frame. For a moment she resisted, pride lashing out even through agony, but the force of the contraction stole all protest. He lifted her as though she weighed no more than a child, striding through the drifts toward Pine Hollow's center. The streets emptied as they passed, shutters drawn, doors bolted. From behind curtains, eyes watched. Whispers traveled quicker than the storm. The wild man and the widow, what sin, what shame, what scandal to be carried through town in his arms. At the steps of the church he stopped, lowering her beneath the sheltering awning where the snow could not reach. The bell above hung silent, yet the square filled slowly, faces peering from corners, drawn by curiosity sharpened into malice. Evelyn's pain echoed under the eaves, a sound so human it made even the cruelest hearts falter. Jonah set his jaw, scanning the crowd. "She's in labor," he said, voice low but steady. "She needs help." No one moved. The silence that followed was heavier than any blizzard. A rancher muttered, "Not our place." A woman clutched her shawl tighter, shaking her head. The midwife, oldest in town, stepped forward only to retreat when another whispered sharply in her ear. Shame and fear ruled stronger than compassion, and the people of Pine Hollow clung to their gossip like armor. Evelyn gasped, fingers clawing the wood beside her. Sweat beaded her brow despite the cold. Her eyes found Jonah's, wide with terror she fought to swallow. Don't let us die here," she whispered, voice frayed by both pain and memory of all the doors closed to her. Jonah knelt beside her, the weight of the crowd pressing down, and for the first time in years, he let his voice rise. "You'd let her suffer because of your pride." His gaze swept them, black eyes burning. "You'd let a child freeze before it ever drew breath, because shame is easier to carry than mercy." The word struck, but no one stepped forward. The townsfolk stood bound by their own cowardice, unable to look at him, unable to look away. So Jonah did what none of them would. His calloused hands, more used to steel and rope, turned gentle, guiding Evelyn through each wave of torment. He wiped her brow with his own sleeve, steadied her breathing with low, gruff words that seemed strange in his mouth, but anchored her against the storm within her body. The hours dragged, each contraction a battle fought in the cold shadow of a church, with the crowd gathered like witnesses to a trial they dared not interrupt. Her screams rose, broke, and then at last gave way to the thin, piercing cry of a child. It carried through the square, cutting through the stillness like a blade. Jonah's hands trembled as he lifted the small, writhing life into the pale light. His eyes glistened unblinking, as though he had seen a miracle too sacred for words. He placed the child into Evelyn's arms, and for the first time her face softened, not with relief, but with awe. The baby's cry filled the air, a sound too pure for scorn, and the crowd could not hold their hardness against it. A hat was lowered. An old woman wept openly. The town that had turned its back now stood stripped of its cruelty, undone by the fragile proof of survival in the mountain man's arms. Jonah rose slowly, towering over them all, chest bare to the cold yet unshaken. His voice came rough, but steady as stone. This child does not belong to shame. She belongs to tomorrow. The words lingered, heavy with truth none could deny. The snow eased as though the storm itself had been listening, flakes drifting softer, slower, around the quiet square. No one dared answer him. All they could do was weep. The infant's cry echoed across Pine Hollow, carried through the pines and into the mountains beyond, as though announcing not just a birth, but a reckoning. And though the crowd began to scatter, whispers subdued, something remained unspoken, suspended in the frozen air, the knowledge that nothing in their town would ever be quite the same again.